The footage played on every screen nationwide. Officer Bradley Winters smirked as he slammed General Elaine Carter against her car. He couldn't see the 4 stars hidden beneath her jacket. The entire nation watched what happened next, and nobody saw it coming. If you're watching this story unfold, let me know where you're tuning in from in the comments below. This is a story that will shake you to your core about power, justice, and silent strength. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves respect, regardless of their appearance, and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers. Now let's dive into how a routine traffic stop became a national reckoning. General Elaine Carter gripped her steering wheel with the same calm precision she'd applied to every mission throughout her 27-year military career. At 48, she was one of the highest-ranking black female officers in the United States Army, with a distinguished service record that included combat leadership in Afghanistan's strategic command positions and now an upcoming Pentagon appointment that would break yet another glass ceiling. The Georgia countryside rolled past her window as she drove back from visiting her mother in her childhood hometown. These visits always grounded her, a reminder of where she came from and why she served. The small town of Pinewood appeared on the horizon, a place she typically drove through without stopping. Pinewood had a complicated history with race relations, whispers of police misconduct cases that mysteriously disappeared, and a reputation among black travelers as a town to pass through quickly. General Carter noticed the patrol car before it pulled out behind her, a sixth sense developed over decades of navigating spaces where her presence was often unwelcome. She checked her speed automatically, though she knew she wasn't speeding. The cruiser's lights flashed, and she signaled immediately, pulling to the shoulder with textbook precision. Officer Bradley Winters watched the black sedan pull over with practiced efficiency. At 42, Winters had spent 15 years on the Pinewood police force, building a reputation among his colleagues as someone who kept the town in order. What his official record didn't show were the 17 complaints filed against him by black and Latino drivers, all dismissed by Police Chief Vernon Hodges as misunderstandings or lack of respect for authority. What his fellow officers knew but never discussed were his comments in the break room, the jokes that made some of them uncomfortable, and the particular attention he paid to certain drivers. Winters approached the vehicle with his hand resting on his holster, a stance he didn't take with every driver. He watched the driver's hands remain visible on the steering wheel, noting the woman's calm demeanor with irritation rather than approval. "License and registration," he demanded, skipping the customary explanation for the stop. General Carter maintained her composure, her voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to command. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over, officer?" The question was standard reasonable, asked without a hint of confrontation. Yet Winters' face tightened. "Taillights out. License and registration now." His tone sharpened, volume increasing. Carter nodded, her movements deliberate. "I'm going to reach for my purse on the passenger seat to get my license." Her military precision in announcing her movements was second nature, a practice taught to all personnel for interactions with authorities. Winters watched with growing agitation as she retrieved her identification with efficient, measured movements. Something about her composure triggered him. In his mind, her calmness wasn't cooperation, but defiance, as if she wasn't sufficiently intimidated by his authority. Across the street, 17-year-old Trevor Williams was walking home from his part-time job when he noticed the police stop. Something about the officer's body language made him pause, then quietly pull out his phone. He'd been taught by his parents what to do when witnessing potential police misconduct. Start recording, stay back, be a witness. General Carter handed over her license and registration, everything in perfect order. Officer Winters scanned the documents, his expression changing subtly as he noted her address in Virginia, her perfect driving record. Rather than diffusing his suspicion, these details somehow inflamed it. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered abruptly. Carter paused her training, calculating risks and responses. "May I ask why that's necessary, officer? My documentation is in order." Winters' patience snapped. "I said get out of the car, now." His hand moved to his holster again, a gesture not lost on the general. Carter complied, her movements fluid and controlled as she stepped from the vehicle. She stood straight, hands visible, her military bearing evident even in civilian clothes. Winters stepped closer, intentionally invading her personal space. "You people always think you're above the law, don't you?" The comment hung in the air, its implications unmistakable. Carter remained silent, her eyes steady, not rising to the bait. Her silence seemed to further agitate Winters. "What too good to answer?" He grabbed her arm, roughly spinning her toward the car. Hands on the vehicle, Trevor's fingers tightened around his phone, recording every moment as several other passers-by slowed, witnessing the escalation. With unnecessary force, Winters shoved Carter against her sedan, the impact causing her jacket to shift slightly. He wrenched her arms behind her back, the handcuffs clicking with finality. As he roughly patted her down, his hand brushed against something on her inner jacket pocket. Curious, he pulled the fabric aside, revealing for just a moment the edge of a military ID and the distinct shape of 4 stars on her epaulette. General Carter, 4-star general. The realization hit Winters like a physical blow, a momentary widening of his eyes, the only indication he recognized the significance. But rather than backing down, something darker took over. Too committed to retreat, too proud to correct course, he doubled down. "Playing dress-up as a military officer. That's a federal offense," he sneered, though a tremor in his voice betrayed his sudden uncertainty. He yanked her toward the patrol car with excessive force, even as murmurs from gathering onlookers grew louder. Trevor's finger hit the upload button, the video already streaming to social media as Winters forced General Carter into the back seat. The car door slammed with an ominous finality, but it wasn't the end. It was merely the opening salvo of a storm no one in Pinewood could have anticipated. The fluorescent lights of the Pinewood police station buzzed overhead as General Elaine Carter sat perfectly straight in the uncomfortable metal chair, handcuffs still binding her wrists. Despite the indignity of her situation, she maintained the same composed bearing that had carried her through firefights and Pentagon briefings. Her uniform might be absent, but her military discipline remained evident in every line of her posture. Desk Sergeant Jason Miller was halfway through processing her paperwork when his scrolling thumb froze on his personal phone. The video that had begun circulating just 30 minutes earlier showed his colleague manhandling a woman who, according to the rapidly multiplying comments, was a high-ranking military officer. Miller looked up sharply, really seeing the woman seated across the room for the first time. Even in civilian clothes, there was no mistaking that posture that composed dignity. "Holy shit," he whispered immediately, reaching for the desk phone to call Police Chief Vernon Hodges. Within 15 minutes, the station door burst open as Hodges rushed in, his face flushed and his tie askew. At 57, the police chief had navigated numerous small-town controversies through a combination of charmed strategic apologies and convenient paperwork losses. One look at General Carter, however, told him this situation would require more than his usual playbook. "General Carter, he began, his voice adopting the conciliatory tone he reserved for the town's wealthiest residents. "There appears to have been an unfortunate misunderstanding." Carter met his gaze with unwavering calm. "I'd like to make my phone call now," she stated, her first words since arriving at the station, carrying the quiet authority that had commanded thousands of troops. As Hodges fumbled to comply, the video of her arrest surpassed 2 million views across social media platforms. Carter's single call went to Captain Marcus Reed, her most trusted aide. Her instructions were precise, delivered in the same measured tone she used for critical operations. Location, situation, necessary responses, and exact timing. No emotion colored her words, just strategic clarity. 15 miles away, Mayor Elizabeth Morrison's charity luncheon was interrupted by her assistant's urgent whisper. Excusing herself, she watched the viral video in the hallway, her political instincts immediately recognizing the catastrophe unfolding for her town. "Cancel my appointments," she ordered, already calculating damage control measures. and get me everything we have on Officer Winters. At the Pentagon, urgent messages circulated through secure channels. General Carter was not just any officer, but one of their most promising leaders respected across political lines, with a reputation for uncompromising integrity and strategic brilliance. Her scheduled testimony before Congress the following week on military readiness suddenly took on new dimensions. Captain Reed arrived at the station within 40 minutes, accompanied by 2 military lawyers in impeccable uniforms. The front desk officer attempted to delay them, claiming visiting hours protocols, but withered under Reed's calm statement, "We're not visitors, we're her official representation." Inside, Chief Hodges was offering effusive apologies, promises of immediate release, and hints about handling this quietly. Carter listened without expression, neither accepting nor rejecting his increasingly desperate overtures. When Reed entered, her only acknowledgement was a slight nod. "General, we've prepared to secure your release through any necessary channels," Reed stated. Carter surprised everyone by responding, "We'll follow standard procedure, Captain. No exceptions." It was a strategic choice that Hodges failed to recognize as the first move in a much larger campaign. While this unfolded, Officer Winters huddled with fellow officers in the break room, his initial bravado crumbling as he scrolled through his phone. She was disrespectful, he insisted to increasingly skeptical colleagues. "You don't understand how they were looking at me lately like they owned the place." His use of "they" hung in the air, causing several officers to find reasons to return to their desks. Outside the station, the first media vans from Atlanta arrived, setting up cameras as Trevor Williams gave his third interview of the hour. The high school student spoke with remarkable poise about what he'd witnessed, his steadiness on camera making the footage even more damning. "She never raised her voice," he explained to a national correspondent. "She was respectful the entire time. It was like he was angry that she wasn't afraid of him." The processing for Carter's release took exactly as long as regulations required, no shortcuts accepted or offered. When she finally walked out of the station, her posture remained military perfect, her expression unreadable as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Captain Reed moved to shield her from the press, but she stopped him with a subtle gesture. She faced the assembled media directly, the afternoon sun illuminating her face, then walked purposefully to her car without answering a single question. Her silence spoke volumes, a tactical decision that would prove more powerful than any statement. As Carter drove away from the station, Chief Hodges retreated to his office, loosening his collar as he made the first of many calls, attempting to contain the situation. On his television, the breaking news banner already told him he was too late. 4-star general handcuffed during traffic stop. Exclusive footage raises questions about policing in Georgetown. By midnight, the video of General Elaine Carter's arrest had been viewed 27 million times. Social media platforms blazed with outrage as the footage spread across national and international news outlets, analyzed frame by former law enforcement officers, military personnel, civil rights leaders, and ordinary citizens stunned by what they witnessed. The hashtag #GeneralCarter became the top trending topic worldwide, with secondary tags #Pinewood Police and #Respect her rank following close behind. Each share, each repost, each outraged comment added fuel to a fire spreading far beyond the small town of Pinewood. In his bedroom, Trevor Williams stared at his phone in disbelief as notifications overwhelmed his previously quiet social media accounts. Interview requests flooded his inbox from every major network, his follower count jumping from 78 to over 50,000 in hours. His parents sat with him, both proud and concerned, as comments ranged from praise for his quick thinking to threatening messages from accounts defending Officer Winters. "You did the right thing," his father reassured him, even as he made mental notes to increase security on their home. "But this is bigger than we anticipated." Trevor nodded, understanding the weight of accidental witness. "I couldn't just walk by," he said simply. At the Pentagon, a carefully worded statement appeared on official channels. The United States Armed Forces stands firmly behind General Elaine Carter, whose exemplary 30-year career and leadership represent the highest values of our military. We are deeply concerned by the treatment she received and have full confidence that justice will prevail in this situation. The measured language belied the furious calls happening behind closed doors as military leaders across branches expressed outrage at the treatment of one of their most respected generals. In her hotel room, General Carter finally allowed herself a moment of privacy. She removed her jacket, examining the bruises forming on her wrists and arms where the handcuffs and Winter's grip had left their mark. For just a moment, her composed expression faltered, not from physical pain, but from the weight of familiar indignity. Her mind flashed to other moments throughout her career, the West Point instructor who insisted she couldn't have written her own exceptional paper, the commander who bypassed her for promotion despite superior evaluations, the countless times she'd been mistaken for administrative staff rather than the commanding officer. Each instance had been met with the same disciplined response she'd shown today, a strategy of composure that had carried her to unprecedented heights in the military hierarchy. Her phone rang constantly calls from the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, civil rights attorneys, and media outlets all seeking her response. She answered selectively, her conversations brief and strategic. To her military superiors, she assured them she was physically unharmed. To civil rights leaders, she listened more than she spoke. To the media, through her aide, she promised a statement when the time was right. At the Pinewood Police Department, Officer Bradley Winters had been placed on administrative leave, a development he greeted with indignation. "This is a railroading," he insisted to Police Union Representative Dennis Cooper in a tense meeting. She was confrontational. "The video doesn't show everything." Cooper, a 20-year veteran of police politics, viewed the footage again with increasing concern. "Brad, I'll represent you because that's my job," he said finally. "But you need to understand what we're facing here. This isn't some random traffic stop. This is a 4-star general with a spotless record. Even the body cam footage." Winters cut him off. "The equipment malfunctioned. It happens." Cooper's expression showed exactly how convenient that malfunction appeared. Meanwhile, Mayor Elizabeth Morrison called an emergency town meeting, the local high school auditorium filling beyond capacity as residents demanded answers. The crowd reflected Pinewood's demographics, predominantly white faces in the central seats, Black and Latino residents clustered near the back and sides, the physical segregation, a visual representation of the town's unspoken divisions. "I understand your concerns," Morrison began, her political experience and evident in her measured tone. "A full investigation will be conducted with complete transparency." The promise rang hollow against audience shouts about previous incidents, complaints that had disappeared, and the pattern of behavior many had witnessed but few had documented until now. Online digital sleuths were already uncovering Officer Winters' history. His social media accounts, hastily set to private, but not before screenshots were captured, revealed concerning posts about maintaining order and respect for authority. Former residents of Pinewood shared their own experiences with the officer patterns emerging that painted a disturbing picture of selective enforcement and escalation. As this digital investigation unfolded, news specials highlighted General Carter's extraordinary career, her groundbreaking combat leadership, her 3 Purple Hearts, her strategic innovations that had saved countless American lives in complex operations. Military colleagues spoke of her legendary calm under pressure, her mentorship of younger officers, regardless of background, and her unwavering integrity. If there's anyone who would handle this situation with dignity and strategic thinking, it's General Carter, one retired colonel stated. She doesn't just react. She responds with purpose. In Washington, D.C., the president placed a personal call to General Carter. What transpired in that 15-minute conversation remained private, but sources close to the administration noted the president's somber expression afterward in immediate meetings with the Attorney General and civil rights advisors. As midnight approached, General Carter sat alone in her hotel room watching the coverage unfold across multiple channels. Her face revealed nothing as pundits debated, analyzed, and speculated about her next move. Only she knew that while the world saw today's events as an outrage demanding immediate response, she recognized something different, an opportunity decades in the making, a chance to address not just one officer's actions, but an entire system's failings. She turned off the television, opened her laptop, and began to type, laying out a strategy as meticulous as any military campaign she'd ever commanded. What's your reaction to the viral explosion of General Carter's arrest? Can you imagine what it must feel like to dedicate your life to serving your country, only to face such disrespect based on the color of your skin? Comment. Number 1. If you believe there's no excuse for Officer Winter's behavior, regardless of circumstances, or number 2, if you think we should wait for more facts. Has social media changed how accountability works in your opinion? Don't forget to like this video if you're invested in seeing justice served, and subscribe to follow General Carter's response in the next part of this extraordinary story. What do you think will happen when the Department of Justice gets involved? Dawn broke over Pinewood as black SUVs with government plates rolled into town, their arrival marking a seismic shift in the small community's power dynamics. The Department of Justice had announced a formal investigation into the Pinewood Police Department, citing serious concerns about potential patterns of misconduct and civil rights violations. Leading the federal team was Special Agent Vanessa Torres, a veteran investigator known for her methodical approach and uncompromising pursuit of facts. As Torres and her team established their temporary headquarters in the county courthouse, Police Chief Vernon Hodges paced his office phone pressed to his ear. "Senator, I understand your concerns, but we have protocols." The voice on the other end cut him off sharply enough that Hodges winced. Political allies who had once assured him of their unwavering support were now unreachable, or worse, explicitly distancing themselves from his department. His 23-year tenure as chief had weathered previous storms through a careful system of favors, selective documentation, and strategic community outreach. Now, as federal agents requested access to personnel files, complaint records, and internal communications, those same systems threatened to become evidence against him. Across town, General Elaine Carter sat in a conference room with her expanding team. Captain Marcus Reed coordinating military resources, civil rights attorney Sharon Washington reviewing legal options, and media specialist Daniel Freeman planning public communications. Carter listened more than she spoke, her questions precise and targeted when she intervened. "We're not pursuing a personal vendetta," she reminded them. "We're addressing a systemic failure that extends far beyond one officer or one department." Washington nodded, impressed by Carter's strategic vision. "Most clients want immediate personal vindication," she noted. "Your approach is much more comprehensive." And Carter's response was simple. "I've spent my career thinking about systems, not symptoms." Meanwhile, Officer Bradley Winters faced his own crisis as reporters camped outside his modest suburban home, their presence forcing his wife, Julie, and teenage daughters to cancel work and school. Inside, Winters alternated between defensive rage and creeping fear. "They're making me into a monster," he insisted as Julie scrolled through increasingly hostile social media comments. "You don't understand what it's like out there, the split-second decisions we have to make." Julie's response was quiet but devastating. Was handcuffing an unarmed woman who showed no resistance a split-second decision? At the Pinewood Police Department, Internal Affairs investigator Detective James Harrison reviewed the incident documentation with growing concern. The absence of body cam footage from Winter's equipment created a conspicuous gap in the record. "System malfunction," the report stated, but the timing strained credibility, especially given that Winter's previous 3 malfunctions had all coincided with civilian complaints. More troubling were the preliminary interviews Harrison conducted with other officers. Their careful, measured responses contained significant pauses and qualifiers, the language of people navigating between departmental loyalty and legal jeopardy. Officer Diane Rodriguez finally broke the pattern during her interview, her 20 years on the force and impending retirement freeing her to speak more directly. "There's always been 2 kinds of policing in Pinewood," she stated after Harrison assured her of confidentiality. "Depends on who you are, where you live, what you look like. Most of us just try to do our jobs right, but some—" She named no names, but her meaningful glance toward the chief's office spoke volumes. At City Hall, Mayor Elizabeth Morrison faced mounting pressure from community leaders and business owners concerned about Pinewood's rapidly deteriorating reputation. The town's modest tourism industry and recent efforts to attract technology companies now appeared in jeopardy as national headlines painted Pinewood as an emblem of backward discriminatory policing. "We need to get ahead of this," insisted Chamber of Commerce President Richard Oakes. "Fire Winters, maybe even Hodges make a clean break." Morrison understood the political calculation, but also recognized the legal complexities. "If we terminate them now, it could appear we're admitting liability before the investigation concludes." The debate continued behind closed doors, while protesters gathered outside with signs demanding justice for General Carter and reform Pinewood Police now. Trevor Williams and his family faced their own challenges as their phone rang constantly with media requests and their social media accounts filled with messages ranging from supportive to threatening. "You should be proud," Trevor's mother told him as they reviewed enhanced security measures for their home. Not many people would have had the courage to start recording and share what they saw. Trevor nodded through the weight of his unexpected role as a key witness, felt heavy on his 17-year-old shoulders. The Williams family wasn't alone in receiving threats. Other witnesses who had come forward reported similar intimidation attempts, a pattern quickly noted by FBI investigators. As these developments unfolded, General Carter prepared for her first formal press conference. The venue, a hotel ballroom in Atlanta, was selected for its capacity and security features. Military aides coordinated with local law enforcement for perimeter control, while media specialists arranged seating for international press. Carter reviewed her statement one final time, the words carefully chosen to focus on systems rather than individuals, on solutions rather than recriminations. As she did so, her mind returned to childhood lessons from her father, a Vietnam veteran who had taught her about dignity in the face of injustice. "They may control the situation," he had told her after a store clerk had followed 10-year-old Elaine through the aisles, "but you control how you respond to it. And that response shapes not just who you are, but who they become." Those words had guided her through West Point, through combat zones, through Pentagon politics, and now through this most public of challenges. As the hour for the press conference approached, the hotel ballroom filled beyond capacity. Network cameras positioned for optimal angles, while journalists from across the globe checked recording equipment and compared notes on this extraordinary story. Security personnel conducted final sweeps as General Carter waited in a side room, Captain Reed at her side. "Are you ready, General?" he asked, knowing the answer but following protocol. Carter straightened her perfectly aligned uniform, the 4 stars on her shoulders catching the light. "I've been ready for this moment my entire career, Captain," she responded, her voice carrying the quiet certainty that had led troops into battle and guided national security decisions. "Some fights choose you." She stepped toward the door as the world waited to hear from the woman whose dignified silence had spoken more powerfully than words ever could. The hotel ballroom fell silent as General Elaine Carter approached the podium, her military bearing creating a gravitational pull that drew all eyes. Cameras clicked, rapidly documenting her first public appearance since the incident. She wore her full dress uniform, 4 stars gleaming on her shoulders, medals and ribbons telling the story of an extraordinary career of service. For nearly 20 seconds, she stood in silence, surveying the room with the measured gaze of a commander assessing a battlefield. When she finally spoke, her voice carried effortlessly to every corner without seeming raised. I stand before you today, not as an individual seeking personal redress, but as an American who has dedicated her life to protecting the constitutional rights and dignity of every citizen of this nation. Her words, precisely chosen and delivered with uncompromising clarity, laid out not a personal grievance, but a systematic analysis of policing in America. Carter presented statistics specific to Pinewood traffic stops, broken down by race disparity in outcomes, complaint patterns, and enforcement priorities. The data told a story more damning than any personal accusation could have been. What happened to me was not an isolated incident, she continued, nor was it the worst example of its kind. The difference is that my position has created visibility for a reality that thousands of Americans face daily without cameras present, without hashtags trending, without press conferences being called. Rather than focus on Officer Winters, Carter widened the lens to departmental leadership, municipal oversight, training deficiencies, and accountability structures. She outlined specific recommendations based on successful reforms in other jurisdictions. Her military experience in leadership and organizational structure evident in the precision of her analysis. As she concluded, she addressed the officer directly for the first and only time. To Officer Winters, I say this moment is larger than both of us. How we respond to it will determine whether it becomes merely another incident or the catalyst for necessary change. In his living room, Bradley Winters watched the press conference with mounting disbelief. He had expected accusations, emotion demands for his firing. The general's measured systematic dismantling of not just his actions but the entire system that had shaped him was something he had no defense against. His anger began giving way to a more uncomfortable emotion, fear, not just for his job but for the unraveling of a worldview in which he had been the protector, the authority, the one who determined which rules applied to whom. Public reaction to Carter's statement was overwhelming. Social media platforms tracked hundreds of thousands of supportive messages, news analysts praised her strategic focus, and civil rights organizations highlighted how her approach elevated the conversation beyond a single incident to address root causes. Even those who had initially defended Winters found themselves struggling to counter Carter's evidence-based presentation. The police union attempted to regain narrative control with its own hastily organized press conference. Union Representative Dennis Cooper presented a different set of statistics suggesting officer safety concerns, departmental understaffing, and the challenges of modern policing. His attempts to portray Winters as a dedicated officer facing unprecedented scrutiny fell flat against the backdrop of Carter's methodical presentation and the damning video evidence. Halfway through the event, reporters began leaving for a breaking development elsewhere. That development was retired Sergeant Michael Davis, Officer Winters' former partner, approaching FBI investigators with a thumb drive and a conscience he could no longer quiet. I can't watch this happen anymore, Davis told Special Agent Torres. I kept records because I knew someday it would all catch up to us. The drive contained unofficial documentation of departmental practices, which neighborhoods received increased patrols, which drivers were considered profile stops, how complaints were reclassified or discouraged. Most damaging was evidence suggesting Chief Hodges had personally intervened to protect certain officers, including Winters, from accountability measures. As this new evidence emerged, General Carter returned to Washington for her previously scheduled Pentagon meetings. Her calm focus on her military duties amid the storm surrounding her personal experience only enhanced her stature among colleagues and the public. Congressional leaders announced hearings on police accountability, with Carter requested as a key witness based on both her recent experience and her strategic expertise in organizational leadership. In Pinewood, Mayor Morrison implemented immediate police reforms, mandatory body cam usage with strict malfunction protocols, civilian review of all complaints, and implicit bias training. While these measures addressed public pressure, they also tacitly acknowledged the validity of Carter's analysis. Trevor Williams found himself unexpectedly at the center of opportunities as veterans organizations reached out offering scholarship support for the young man whose quick thinking had documented the incident. "You showed moral courage, so," one retired Marine colonel told him. "That's something we value in this country's future leaders." Between her official duties, Carter made time for a private meeting with other Black military officers, many of whom shared their own experiences with law enforcement. The gathering included generals, admirals, colonels, and younger officers, a cross-section of military leadership united by common experiences despite their uniform. "We serve a country that doesn't always serve us equally," noted one admiral. "Your response has given us a framework for addressing these contradictions with strategic clarity rather than just personal pain." As they spoke, Carter remembered a pivotal moment from her early career. As a captain, she had faced blatant discrimination from a superior officer who had systematically undermined her authority and blocked her advancement. Rather than filing a complaint that might have labeled her a problem, she had documented everything meticulously, built alliances across the command structure, and outperformed every metric until her results were undeniable. When eventually promoted past her antagonist, she had implemented systemic changes to promotion criteria that created more objective evaluation measures for all personnel. "Sometimes," she told the gathered officers, "the most effective response to individual discrimination is systemic reform that lifts everyone while removing subjective barriers. This situation is no different." What none of the officers knew, what even her closest aides hadn't yet been told, was that Carter had been developing a comprehensive police reform initiative for nearly 3 years, working with legal experts, progressive law enforcement leaders, and civil rights organizations. The incident in Pinewood hadn't derailed her plans. It had provided the platform and moral authority to launch them on a national scale. As she left the meeting, her phone buzzed with news. The Department of Justice was expanding its investigation to 3 neighboring counties based on preliminary findings from Pinewood. The seeds of change she had planted were already beginning to grow. As the investigation intensified, Police Chief Vernon Hodges gathered his most trusted officers in an unmarked location 20 miles outside Pinewood. The roadside diner's back room offered privacy for what he termed strategic response planning. In reality, it was the beginning of a coordinated counterattack against General Carter's credibility. "She's made this personal," Hodges told the assembled group, though Carter had scrupulously avoided personalizing the issue in her public statements. "So we respond in kind. Every driver makes mistakes. We find hers." The plan that emerged targeted not just the incident itself, but Carter's character and history. Fabricated claims about her driving before the stop began circulating through friendly media channels, suggestions of erratic movements, possible intoxication, verbal aggression toward Officer Winters that conveniently occurred when his body cam malfunctioned. These allegations came from anonymous department sources and witnesses who feared retaliation. Simultaneously, allies of the department began scrutinizing General Carter's military record, searching for anything exploitable. When her exemplary service provided no ammunition, the focus shifted to suggesting her current actions were politically motivated, part of larger ambitions beyond her military role. "She's using this incident to position herself for appointments in the next administration," claimed one conservative commentator, transforming her measured response into calculated career advancement. Officer Winters emerged from seclusion for an exclusive interview with a sympathetic host on a right-wing network. Seated in a softly lit studio, his police uniform replaced by a button-down shirt that suggested everyday relatability, He presented himself as the victim of a media frenzy and political correctness. "I was just doing my job," he insisted, voice catching with practiced emotion. When someone becomes confrontational during a traffic stop, we have protocols. I didn't see stars on a uniform. I saw a driver refusing to comply with lawful orders. The interviewer nodded sympathetically, asking no questions about the video evidence contradicting his characterization of Carter's behavior. The segment closed with a fundraising announcement for Winter's legal defense. The interview received immediate amplification across right-wing media platforms, creating an alternate narrative in which Winters represented all police officers facing impossible standards, and Carter embodied political forces undermining law enforcement authority. Comment sections filled with supportive messages for Winters, many containing thinly veiled racial commentary about knowing your place and respecting authority. While this media campaign unfolded, the FBI investigation revealed disturbing patterns within the Pinewood Police Department. Analysis of 5 years of traffic stop data showed black drivers were 6 times more likely to be searched than white drivers, 8 times more likely to have force used against them, and 10 times more likely to have complaints dismissed without investigation. Most damning was evidence that similar incidents had been systematically covered up through a combination of technical malfunctions, documentation, errors, and witness intimidation. Throughout this period, General Carter maintained her disciplined silence on the counter-narrative, focusing instead on her military duties and scheduled congressional testimony. Her restraint frustrated supporters eager for her to defend herself against mounting accusations, but reflected her strategic understanding that engaging directly would diminish her authority and reduce a systemic issue to a personal dispute. This didn't mean she was passive. Carter's legal team documented every false claim, building a potential defamation case, while her military colleagues privately reached out to media executives, questioning the journalistic standards applied to unverified allegations against a decorated officer. The online harassment campaign against Carter intensified, with anonymous accounts posting everything from racial slurs to threats of violence. Military cybersecurity experts traced many of these accounts to a handful of IP addresses, including several within Pinewood's municipal network information quietly provided to federal investigators. Trevor Williams faced his own challenges as his school principal received pressure from police-affiliated community members to discipline him for spreading misinformation harmful to the town's reputation. When Trevor's parents confronted the administration about this intimidation, they discovered other families had received similar pressure after their children expressed support for General Carter on social media. Former Sergeant Michael Davis continued providing crucial evidence to investigators, his insider knowledge helping to contextualize patterns and practices. There was an understanding, he explained during formal testimony, about which drivers deserved extra attention and which complaints would never see daylight. The chief called it community-oriented policing in meetings, but the application was anything but community serving. As pressure mounted from both sides, General Carter declined numerous high-profile interview requests that would have given her a platform to counter the allegations. Her aide, Captain Reed, became the public face of her response, his brief statements focusing on the ongoing investigation rather than the media narrative. General Carter has provided her full cooperation to federal authorities and will continue to do so, became his standard response, followed by redirection to the broader issues of police accountability and systemic reform. The Pentagon continued its unwavering support military leadership, closing ranks around one of their own. When questioned about Carter's credibility, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs responded simply, "General Carter has led troops in combat, managed billion-dollar strategic initiatives, and earned every one of her 4 stars through exemplary service to this nation. Her character speaks for itself." In Pinewood, protests continued daily outside the police department, growing in size as community members, previously afraid to speak out, found courage in numbers. Counter-protesters supporting the police department appeared as well, creating tense standoffs that required state troopers to maintain separation. Local businesses displayed divided loyalties through window signs, either supporting our police or demanding justice and accountability. The polarization reflected national divisions, with Pinewood becoming a symbolic battleground for broader cultural and political conflicts. General Carter's mother, 80-year-old Viola Carter, received threatening phone calls at her home in Atlanta, prompting military security personnel to establish protective surveillance. When reporters asked Mrs. Carter about the threats, her response reflected the same dignity her daughter had shown. Those who resort to intimidation have already lost the moral argument. My daughter serves a nation founded on principles of justice, not fear. The police union, seeing public opinion continuing to favor Carter despite their media campaign, filed formal countercharges against her, alleging interfering with an officer, resisting arrest, and making false statements. The timing was transparently strategic, announced the day before Carter's scheduled congressional testimony in an obvious attempt to undermine her credibility or force a postponement. Instead, Carter responded with an unexpected escalation of her own formal charges against the entire department leadership, including Chief Hodges for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and conspiracy. The legal filing, hundreds of pages of meticulously documented evidence compiled by her team, landed like a bombshell the evening before her testimony. For the first time, the full scope of Carter's strategic response became clear. She hadn't been silent out of passivity, but patience, building an overwhelming case while her opponents exposed themselves through increasingly desperate tactics. The stage was set for a congressional hearing that would transform a single traffic stop into a national reckoning. What would you do if you were in General Carter's position? Would you have maintained strategic silence or fought back immediately against the false narratives? Comment number 1, if you admire her disciplined approach, or number 2, if you think she should have defended herself more publicly. Has seeing the resistance tactics changed your perspective on how systems protect themselves? Don't forget to like this video if you're appreciating this deep dive into power, race, and justice in America, and subscribe to follow how this showdown concludes. How do you think the congressional hearing will unfold when Carter finally testifies? The Capitol building stood bathed in early morning light as General Elaine Carter ascended the steps, flanked by her legal team and military aides. Her dress uniform, immaculate as always, caught the sun as photographers captured what had become one of the most anticipated congressional testimonies in recent memory. Inside the hearing room, filled to capacity hours before the scheduled start, committee members arranged papers and whispered to aides while spectators murmured in anticipation. The gallery's most striking feature was the last 3 rows, filled entirely with military personnel in full dress uniform. Generals, admirals, colonels, and officers of all ranks who had requested leave to attend in silent support of their colleague. Their presence created a powerful visual statement without a word being spoken. At precisely 9 o'clock, the committee chairman called the hearing to order. Today, we address serious questions about policing practices, accountability systems, and the equal application of law enforcement in our nation, she began. We will hear testimony from multiple witnesses regarding the incident in Pinewood, Georgia, and its broader implications. General Carter was the first to testify, her oath taken with the same solemnity with which she had sworn to defend the Constitution decades earlier. Rather than beginning with her personal experience, she presented a comprehensive analysis of traffic stop data, complaint patterns, and accountability failures in Pinewood and similar departments nationwide. Her testimony included precise documentation, dates, times, case numbers, statistical patterns, and systemic failures that created environments where incidents like hers were not just possible, but probable. What occurred during my traffic stop, she stated, her voice steady and authoritative, was not an aberration, but a predictable outcome of systems designed without sufficient accountability measures or equal protection guarantees. When questioned about Officer Winters' claims regarding her behavior, Carter responded with characteristic precision. The video evidence witness statements and my service record all speak to my conduct during that encounter. I have spent 30 years commanding troops in high-stress environments where composure determines survival. The suggestion that I would abandon that discipline during a routine traffic stop contradicts everything my career demonstrates. The committee members, regardless of political affiliation, found themselves responding to Carter's authority and evidence-based presentation. Even those initially skeptical appeared increasingly convinced by the methodical case she presented. Next came Officer Bradley Winters, visibly uncomfortable without the friendly environment of his previous media appearances. Under oath and faced with specific questions rather than sympathetic prompts, his narrative began showing significant inconsistencies. When asked to explain his body cam malfunction, his answer about technical issues wilted under follow-up questions about the statistical improbability of such malfunctions coinciding precisely with contested civilian encounters. Police Chief Vernon Hodges fared no better. His testimony riddled with contradictions that committee members from both parties noted with increasing skepticism. His explanation for the department's complaint handling procedures collapsed when presented with documentation showing systematic dismissal of cases involving minority civilians. The most damaging moment came when he was asked directly about previous incidents involving Officer Winters. We address all complaints according to department policy, and he insisted only to be confronted with internal emails showing his personal intervention to remove complaints from Winters' record. The hearing took an unexpected turn when committee members introduced a surprising piece of evidence: years of collected data on traffic stops in Pinewood, broken down by race outcome and officer involvement. The source of this meticulously organized information was revealed to be General Carter herself, who had been privately funding a data collection initiative in multiple jurisdictions with histories of discrimination complaints. For the past 3 years, Carter explained when questioned about this revelation, I have worked with civil rights organizations, data scientists, and legal experts to document patterns that individual complaints cannot reveal. My experience in Pinewood was not coincidental. I was aware of the department's history and chose to drive through the town as part of our ongoing documentation project. This disclosure sent shockwaves through the hearing room. What had appeared to be a random incident was now revealed as part of a strategic initiative to expose systemic discrimination through data rather than anecdote. Officer Winters' composure finally broke under questioning about his social media history, particularly posts regarding maintaining order in certain neighborhoods. His attempts to explain these comments as misinterpreted led to increasingly defensive responses that undermined his previous claims about professional conduct. When asked directly about using racial slurs during traffic stops, his non-denial and reference to heat of the moment comments created an audible reaction in the gallery. Former Sergeant Michael Davis provided particularly damaging testimony about departmental culture, describing in detail how officers were evaluated based on their productivity in certain neighborhoods and with certain demographics. There were 2 sets of standards, he explained, how we were expected to handle people who mattered to the department leadership and how we handled everyone else. Trevor Williams testified about what he witnessed and the subsequent intimidation his family had experienced. His poised responses and clear recollection impressed committee members, particularly when forensic experts confirmed the authenticity of his video and its consistency with other witness statements. As the hearing progressed, the Department of Justice announced an expanded investigation into multiple departments in the region based on patterns identified through Carter's data initiative. Police union representatives who had arrived confident in their defense of Winters were observed leaving the hearing during an afternoon recess, their abandonment of their member becoming yet another visual testament to the day's shifting narrative. In her closing statement, General Carter revealed the full scope of her strategy. What happened in Pinewood is not about one officer or one department, she explained. It represents a national failure to ensure equal protection under law for all citizens. The data we've collected across 17 jurisdictions shows nearly identical patterns of discriminatory enforcement. Today is not the end of this process, but the beginning of necessary systemic reform. The hearing concluded with the committee chairperson announcing recommendations for federal oversight of Pinewood's police department, potential criminal charges against department leadership for civil rights violations, and a broader legislative initiative on police accountability standards. As General Carter left the hearing room, the military personnel in attendance stood in unison, rendering a silent salute to their colleague, who had transformed a personal indignity into a platform for national reform. Outside reporters clamored for comments, but Carter simply stated, "The evidence speaks for itself. Now action must follow." What nobody in that hearing room fully understood yet was that Carter's strategy had been developing not for months but years, a campaign planned with the same precision she had brought to military operations. The traffic stop in Pinewood hadn't been an unfortunate incident, but a calculated risk taken by someone who understood that sometimes to change a system, you must first expose yourself to its failures. 3 weeks after the congressional hearing, General Elaine Carter walked down the courthouse steps following a preliminary hearing on the civil rights case against the Pinewood Police Department. The spring sunshine illuminated her face as she spoke briefly with her legal team, her testimony complete for the day. As she approached her waiting car, a voice called out from behind the media barricade, "General Carter?" The harsh, familiar tone cut through the ambient noise, causing heads to turn. Officer Bradley Winters stood at the edge of the permitted press area, his face flushed with emotion. Security personnel moved immediately toward him, but Carter raised a hand to pause their intervention. "Officer Winters," she acknowledged calmly, her posture shifting subtly into the alert stance of a soldier assessing potential threat while appearing completely at ease. The crowd fell silent as Winters stepped forward to the barrier. "You've destroyed my life," his stated voice, tight with accusation. 20 years serving my community, gone because of your agenda. Was it worth it? Setting me up for your political campaign. Carter studied him for a moment, aware of the cameras capturing every aspect of this unexpected confrontation. "No one set you up, Officer Winters," she replied, her voice carrying clearly without seeming raised. "The only agenda was equal application of the law. Your actions that day reflected choices and patterns established long before our encounter." Winter's face contorted. "You people always play the victim. You came to Pinewood looking for trouble." The racial subtext of "you people" hung in the air, confirming in 7 syllables the biases Carter's data had meticulously documented. "I came to Pinewood as an American citizen driving on public roads." Carter responded, her composure unbroken. "The trouble wasn't in my presence, but in your response to it. That's the point you still don't understand." Before Winters could escalate further, his lawyer appeared beside him, whispering urgently as he guided his client away from the barrier. The brief confrontation, lasting less than 60 seconds, appeared on every news network within the hour, Winters' words becoming yet another piece of evidence supporting Carter's case. Meanwhile, across town, Trevor Williams received the National Courage in Witness Award from a coalition of civil rights organizations. At 17, he stood before leaders whose names he had previously only read in history books, accepting recognition for an act he still described as just doing what's right. "I never wanted to be part of something this big," he told the audience. "But that day showed me that sometimes witnessing is itself an act of courage. Silence serves those who abuse power. Truth serves justice." His articulate speech and poised demeanor prompted several universities to contact his parents about potential scholarships, his future brightening in direct proportion to Winters's darkening prospects. At the Pinewood Police Department, FBI agents discovered Chief Hodges attempting to delete server files containing years of departmental communications. The clumsy effort at evidence destruction resulted in immediate obstruction of justice charges. The chief led from the building in handcuffs as officers watched in stunned silence. The symbolism of a police chief experiencing the same indignity he had overseen for countless citizens was lost on no one, least of all the community members gathering across the street with camera phones raised. Mayor Elizabeth Morrison, fighting for political survival, announced the formation of a civilian oversight board with unprecedented authority, the power to review officer hiring, firing, disciplinary decisions, and policy implementation. The board's composition reflected Pinewood's actual demographics, rather than its power structure, with prominent positions for community leaders who had been criticizing police practices for years. "This is not a symbolic gesture," Morrison insisted at the press conference. "This is structural reform with real authority and resources." At the Pentagon, General Carter declined a prestigious promotion that would have moved her further up the military hierarchy. "My current work remains unfinished," she explained to the Joint Chiefs. "The police reform initiative requires my full attention alongside my existing duties." The decision surprised military leadership, but earned their respect, understanding that Carter saw her response to the Pinewood incident not as a personal matter, but as an extension of her oath to protect American constitutional principles. Former Sergeant Michael Davis became a key figure in identifying other departments with similar discriminatory patterns, his insider knowledge helping federal investigators understand how such practices were normalized and concealed. "I was part of the problem for too long," he acknowledged in a public statement. "Now I'm committed to being part of the solution, no matter the personal cost." His testimony led to investigations in 4 additional jurisdictions where data showed statistical patterns matching those in Pinewood. The nationwide police accountability movement gained unprecedented momentum, uniting groups across political and geographical divides. Conservative veterans organizations found common ground with progressive civil rights groups around principles of equal protection under law. Police reform advocates gained credibility through alliance with military leaders who understood both discipline and constitutional duty. Even some police unions began internal reform discussions, recognizing that defending the indefensible undermined public trust in the profession as a whole. Officer Winters' family dynamics shifted dramatically as evidence continued mounting. His wife, Julie, filed for separation after body cam footage from previous incidents revealed a side of her husband's professional conduct she couldn't reconcile with the man she thought she had married. Their teenage daughters, exposed to school environments where their father had become synonymous with racism, struggled with their own identities and relationships. The family damage represented the often overlooked collateral consequences when systems of accountability fail to correct behavior before it becomes entrenched. While these developments unfolded publicly, General Carter made a private visit to her father's grave in the Veterans Cemetery outside Atlanta. James Carter had served in Vietnam, returning to a country that still didn't fully recognize his citizenship despite his sacrifice. "You taught me that dignity isn't given, it's maintained," she said quietly to the headstone, "and that systems change when good people insist they must." The solitary moment of reflection provided Carter the emotional centering needed for what came next. The escalating death threats, requiring her to travel with enhanced security, the conservative media painting her as an agitator rather than a reformer, the political attacks questioning her motives and methods. Each challenge reinforced her resolve rather than weakening it. The Department of Justice findings, published 6 months after the initial incident, confirmed what Carter's data had already demonstrated: systematic discrimination in Pinewood's policing practices, with statistical disparities that couldn't be explained by any factor other than race. The report detailed how leadership had not merely allowed but encouraged targeting of minority residents and visitors, creating a culture where incidents like Carter's were inevitable rather than exceptional. As the legal proceedings moved toward trial, Carter made an unexpected request that initially confounded her legal team: a private meeting with Winters in custody. After extensive discussion about security and legal implications, the meeting was arranged in a courthouse conference room under strict monitoring. Winters entered in handcuffs, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to Carter's uniform. For nearly an hour, they spoke without audiences or cameras, two Americans from vastly different backgrounds and perspectives having the conversation that should have happened on the roadside months earlier. What transpired in that room remained between them, but observers noted Winters' transformed expression when he emerged. The officer who had entered with defiant anger left with something more complex written across his features, the dawning recognition of how completely he had misunderstood not just General Carter, but the very nature of the authority he had claimed to represent. This private confrontation, unlike their public exchange, addressed not symptoms but root causes. Exactly as Carter had approached every aspect of her response since the moment Winters had first stopped her car on that pivotal afternoon in Pinewood. 1 year after the traffic stop that had transformed Pinewood and catalyzed a national movement, General Elaine Carter stood before the town's newly renovated police headquarters. The building looked largely the same from the outside, but everything within had changed. Chief Lisa Rodriguez, a 20-year law enforcement veteran with extensive community policing experience, stood beside Carter at the podium. Behind them, the diverse faces of Pinewood's restructured police force reflected the community they served, the result of recruitment initiatives, transparent hiring practices, and accountability standards that had attracted officers committed to constitutional policing. Today marks not an ending, but a continuation, Carter stated to the assembled crowd and cameras. The work of ensuring equal justice is never complete. It requires constant vigilance, honest assessment, and the courage to correct course when necessary. The Pinewood Police Department had undergone a complete transformation under federal oversight. The Civilian Review Board, initially viewed with skepticism by veteran officers, had proven effective at both addressing misconduct and recognizing exemplary service. Body cameras functioned without mysterious malfunctions. De-escalation training had reduced use of force incidents by 70%, and community engagement programs had begun rebuilding trust in neighborhoods previously defined by police tension. 20 miles away at the State University, Trevor Williams sat in his Introduction to Criminal Justice class, taking meticulous notes. His full scholarship, funded by a coalition of veterans organizations, had launched him toward a career combining law and public policy. The professor referenced the Pinewood incident in her lecture, unaware that one of its key participants sat among her students. Trevor smiled slightly, still adjusting to how his split-second decision to record had altered not just his future, but helped reshape an entire system. His viral video was now standard teaching material in police academies nationwide, used to demonstrate how quickly officer behavior could damage public trust, and how essential accountability had become in an era where any interaction might be documented. Officer Bradley Winters sat across a table from three men whose wrongful convictions had been overturned following the investigation into Pinewood's policing practices. The restorative justice program, part of Winters' plea agreement, required him to face those harmed by the system he had upheld and participated in. "I believed I was enforcing the law," he explained, voice humbled by 18 months of reflection and consequences. "I didn't understand I was selectively enforcing it based on assumptions I didn't even recognize in myself." The conversation was difficult, honest, and necessary, multiplied across dozens of similar sessions with community members who had experienced the discriminatory practices documented in the federal investigation. While serving his reduced sentence, Winters had become an unexpected advocate for police reform, his perspective as a former officer giving him credibility with law enforcement resistant to change. His journey from defender of the status quo to voice for accountability demonstrated the potential for individual transformation within broader systemic change. In Washington, D.C., President Robinson signed the General Carter Police Accountability Act, bipartisan legislation establishing national standards for law enforcement data collection, early intervention systems for problematic officer behavior, and funding for departments implementing evidence-based reforms. Carter stood beside the president during the signing ceremony. Her military bearing as impeccable as always, her focus already on implementation rather than celebration. This legislation provides tools, not solutions, she reminded reporters afterward. The real work happens in communities and training academies and in daily interactions between officers and the citizens they serve. Following the ceremony, Carter held a private meeting with other victims of the Pinewood Police Department's discriminatory practices. Unlike the public hearings and press conferences, this gathering focused on healing rather than policy, on acknowledging harm rather than designing systems. Your experiences were not isolated, and they were not your fault, Carter told the group. They were predictable outcomes of flawed systems. Your willingness to come forward helped change those systems for future generations. Among the attendees was Sergeant Michael Davis, the whistleblower, whose evidence had proven crucial to the investigation. Now working as a police reform consultant, Davis helped departments identify and address discriminatory patterns before they resulted in incidents like Carter's. The hardest part, he told a rookie officer during a training session, is recognizing that good intentions aren't enough. We need good systems that protect both the public and officers from the worst impulses in any human organization. The viral video of Carter's arrest had become standard material in police training nationwide, used alongside data analysis to help officers understand how bias could influence perceptions and decisions. What had been initially framed as a confrontation between an individual officer and citizen had been properly recontextualized as a systemic failure requiring structural solutions. Carter's promotion to an unprecedented military-civilian liaison position recognized her unique contribution to national security through strengthening constitutional protections. Her office coordinated between defense, justice, and homeland security to ensure that civil liberties and equal protection principles remained central to national security policies. The position leveraged her military leadership experience while addressing the civil rights issues that her personal experience had highlighted. On a crisp autumn morning, General Carter drove once again through Pinewood, this time deliberately, rather than as part of her data collection initiative. She observed a police officer conducting a traffic stop with professional courtesy, following proper protocols regardless of the driver's appearance. The scene represented progress, though Carter remained too strategic to mistake a single observation for complete transformation. Officer Jasmine Parker, unaware of the four-star general observing her work, completed the stop by providing the driver with information about a taillight needing repair, her body cam documenting the entire professional interaction. No confrontation, no escalation, simply public safety enforcement applied equally and respectfully. Later that afternoon, Carter met Trevor Williams at a local coffee shop for his university project, interviewing key figures from the Pinewood case. The general, usually guarded with media, had made an exception for the young man whose courage had provided crucial documentation. Looking back, Trevor asked, "What would you have done differently that day?" Carter considered the question carefully. "Nothing," she finally replied. Not because the experience was pleasant, but because it served a necessary purpose. "My silence wasn't submission, Trevor. It was strategic patience. Sometimes the most powerful response to injustice is to allow it to fully reveal itself before you address it completely." What Trevor didn't know, what few people outside Carter's closest advisors understood, was that her response to Pinewood had been part of a career-long strategy. Throughout her military service, she had documented, analyzed, and addressed discriminatory systems, not through complaint, but through methodical reform. The traffic stop hadn't derailed her work. It had amplified it, creating the platform and moral authority to implement changes she had been designing for decades. As they concluded the interview, Carter shared a final observation. The true measure of this case won't be what happened to Officer Winters or Chief Hodges. It won't even be the legislation or the department reforms. It will be whether we sustain these changes when cameras aren't watching and headlines have moved on. Justice isn't an event. It's a practice requiring constant renewal. The sun set over Pinewood, a town forever changed by a traffic stop that had exposed not just one officer's bias, but an entire system's failures. The general, who had maintained perfect composure throughout that encounter, had transformed a moment of personal indignity into a movement for national accountability. Her strategic silence had proven more powerful than any immediate protest could have been, her patient documentation more effective than any single complaint. Sometimes the strongest response to power abused is power properly applied, guided by principle, rather than ego focused on systems rather than symptoms, and committed to justice that extends beyond any individual case to address the underlying conditions that make injustice possible. What do you think about how General Carter transformed her personal experience into systemic change? Has this story changed how you view the relationship between individual incidents and larger patterns? Drop a comment below with your thoughts on the most important lesson from Pinewood's transformation. If you found value in this exploration of power, justice, and strategic patience, please hit that like button to help others find this story. Subscribe to our channel for more compelling narratives that examine America's most challenging issues with nuance and depth. And don't forget to share this with someone who might appreciate how dignity and strategy can overcome even the most entrenched injustice. Thank you for witnessing this journey from confrontation to resolution. And remember, true change happens not in moments of drama, but in the patient work that follows. General Carter's story teaches us that true power often lies in strategic patience rather than immediate reaction. When faced with injustice, her disciplined response, collecting evidence, building alliances, and focusing on systems rather than individuals, proved more effective than any emotional outburst. She understood that lasting change requires addressing root causes, not just symptoms. Her military background gave her both the composure to endure personal indignity and the strategic vision to transform it into meaningful reform. The Pinewood incident reminds us that discrimination doesn't exist in isolation, but within systems that enable it. By methodically documenting patterns, rather than highlighting a single incident, Carter created irrefutable evidence that demanded action. Perhaps most importantly, she demonstrated that dignity cannot be taken, only surrendered. Her unflinching composure in the face of disrespect became her greatest strength. When those with power misuse it, sometimes the most powerful response is to allow that misuse to fully reveal itself before addressing it completely. Justice isn't achieved through vengeance or personal vindication, but through persistent strategic reform that changes conditions for everyone, not just those who can command attention. What moment in General Carter's journey resonated most with you? Have you ever witnessed someone maintaining dignity in the face of injustice like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of quiet strength overcoming systemic racism inspired you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and creating meaningful change. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes silence isn't submission, it's strategy. Thank you for joining us on this journey through injustice to accountability. And remember, real change happens not in moments of confrontation, but in the patient work that follows.